Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So let's continue with my reply to Norkel Corner and Russian Deadpool, and this time we're discussing male homelessness.
You don't care about male homelessness, male suicide, male victims, false, illogical fallacy, actually.
No, actually, if you look back at episode 1 in this series, you'll see that you said that men's rights issues are basically a red herring. So here I've given you yet another example of that so-called red herring.
I do care about male homelessness as much as I do about female homelessness. I've never really discriminated against either one. Homelessness I look at as a non-gender issue.
A non-gendered issue, which coincidentally has 3/4 of the homeless being male. How can you say that isn't a gendered issue when 3/4 of those affected by it are in fact male? For example, here's from an article from The Guardian.
It's hard to track down official statistics on homelessness that take account of gender. But in 2011 the housing charity Crisis found that 84% of the hidden homeless were male. And the latest chained figures suggest that 9 out of 10 people sleeping rough are male. According to Mankind Initiative, in UK refuges are safe houses. There are 33 spaces dedicated to male victims of domestic violence, of which 18 are for gay males only, compared to around 4,000 spaces reserved for females.
So right across the Western world you will find that the percentage of the homeless which are male ranges from the 60% range to the 80% range. And we can average it out at roughly 75%, or 3/4 of the homeless are in fact male. And this obviously changes slightly from country to country and area to area, but on average it's about 75% male, thus making it a gendered issue. And despite 3/4 of the homeless on average being male, females tend to still get preferential treatment when they're homeless. Now this obviously depends on the country and the region within that country, because services change vastly across the West, but on average females are more likely to have services directed towards them, even though they're a minority.
I actually look at the whole idea of fighting for homeless people. I've never really even, I don't think I've ever really once skewed away from the idea, skewed towards one gender or the other. Whenever I've talked about or mentioned homelessness, whether it was on YouTube, which I've done to some degree, but never really gone into great detail, I've never really skewed away from it. I view homelessness as a gender-neutral problem.
Which of course it's not, because the vast majority of the homeless are men, yet women are more likely to receive services. This is a gender issue.
I view it as a problem that is caused primarily from the corruption and, well, let's be honest, the exploitation from capitalism, which has driven a large gap between the rich and the poor, and has essentially, the people that were already poor have gotten poorer, and those that used to, barely make ends meet are now homeless. And this can be from military veterans to normal civilians. Homelessness that may or may not be caused because of the use of drugs or something like that. Homelessness, to me, is an issue that is non-gender specific.
Well, if it's an issue which is non-gender specific, and if we live in a patriarchy which gives males a big advantage, the male privilege that we constantly hear about, then why is it that on average 3/4 of the homeless are male? That's some interesting privilege they have there, isn't it? Of course, the simple truth is that, yes, males are more likely to be politicians or CEOs at the top, but they are also vastly more likely to be on the bottom. This is something which, unfortunately, feminists tend to ignore, because for some reason they only look at the men at the top and completely ignore those who are on the bottom, and then call it equality.
So my personal belief is that it is a huge problem that needs to be looked at overall. I think that it does not. I think the idea of male homelessness, your idea of male homelessness, that I don't care about it, again, illogical fallacy. In fact, quite the contrary, I do care about male homelessness. I just don't really look at it in terms of male or female. I look at it from a gender-neutral perspective. Because I think in terms of Marxism, so I'm thinking more in terms of trying to get away from that whole idea of, oh, well, it's a female thing or it's a male thing. No, homelessness is like drug use, or it's like or even a serious illness. And I hate having to compare shit like that because I'm not really trying to, but I'm trying to use it as an example to say that it's non-discriminatory.
Yet the vast majority of the homeless are male, and women have more services aimed towards them, despite being a minority.
You can be homeless, and homelessness does not just affect one gender or the other. Let's just cut right to the point. It's non-discriminatory. I do believe that because of some of the living standards, because of the wage inequality, I think that women can be more vulnerable to it. But I do think that we have just as much of a male homelessness problem as we do a female homelessness problem. And that's why I really don't think there's a differential between the two. I really don't. That's why I look at it from a non-gender perspective. I kind of going around in circles on that one because I really don't have much to say on that one. But other than the fact that you say I don't care about male homelessness, I think I actually care a lot about. Let's put it this way: it's not that I don't care about male homelessness. I just view homelessness as a non-gender issue because I don't really tend to think that it discriminates.
And now, a Russian Deadpool.
Yeah, it's a problem. It also speaks to the terrible mistreatment of veterans, who make up a good portion of the homeless population. They have trouble adapting to working normal jobs. I kind of know what I'm talking about. Being homeless, being a rolling stone is kind of what it's called. We have trouble staying in one place, holding relationships. Many of us have varying degrees of mental illness, or at least they call it post-traumatic stress disorder. I love George Carlin's speech on that, that soft fucking language. Shell shock. They're shell shocked. And, so it takes actual effort on the part of a community. Feminists are working against this somehow, is what you're saying?
Actually, I don't think I did blame feminism in the video that you're responding to. I simply brought up a male issue that MRAs are fighting for. I find it strange that whenever an MRA brings up a men's rights issue, the automatic response is, but feminists didn't do that. But feminism isn't to blame for that. It's interesting because it shows that we can't talk about gender issues without feminists insisting that we talk about it from a feminist perspective.
There are, of course, female veterans as well who have these exact same issues.
That's true, but 95% of the veterans who are homeless are in fact male. This makes it predominantly a male issue. And the homeless isn't exclusively made up of veterans. There are also people with mental issues, people escaping domestic abuse, because, you know, there's no shelters for men who suffer domestic abuse. There's issues with poverty and numerous other factors. Now, when women are in these situations, as a society we tend to have sympathy for them, which is why we have services for them. We say things like, well, they must have been a victim of domestic abuse, or they must have been a victim of sexual assault when they were younger. And in many cases this is in fact true. Yet when men are homeless, we tend to look at them as being there because of their own fault. Somehow they must be to blame, even though many of them are there for exactly the same reasons. Do you think this might be just a little bit of a double standard, maybe?
Exactly the same issues. Not as many of them are homeless because they do have the option to hoard themselves out for a roof over their head. Whether or not that's a better alternative is debatable.
Oh, look, I totally agree. Neither women or men who whore themselves out for shelter should have to do that. We, as a society, should look after all of them. But realistically, if they are choosing to do that, and I know it's not much of a choice, but if they are choosing to do that instead of, say, I don't know, freezing to death, then we could argue that freezing to death is a worse alternative.
An interesting point in regards to the issues and the mental health issues men have to deal with. Is that something created by men? It's not something you could say would be created by women.
No, I mean,
in terms of why they can't talk, why they can't talk about their emotions, express themselves.
Again, when people talk about male suicides, and it's because they can't talk about their emotions. I think that's kicking a dead man, quite frankly. Some months ago, I did a piece on homelessness, which is overwhelmingly a male problem. A social worker wrote in to say, she emailed me to say that she works that she works with the homeless, and if a homeless woman comes to her on a Friday, she has to give her clothes, money, food, and accommodation. If a man comes in on a Friday, he's sent back out on the street with nothing. I mean, are we really surprised that today, for every woman who commits suicide, 3.5 men will?
Mike, we really need to talk about where you get these figures from. Okay,
they're all official. They're all government figures.
It is true
every one of them.